This story begins in outback Queensland on some of our most iconic farmland and leads all the way to the Cayman Islands. There's a trail of money, big money, moving across the globe from the sale of valuable water licences through complex debt structures and opaque ownership patterns. And the questions raised lead us to two prominent men, Barnaby Joyce and Angus Taylor. Taylor became the Energy Minister when Malcolm Turnbull was dumped as PM. He's an Oxford-educated Rhodes Scholar with big wealth, big business connections and tipped for even bigger things in politics. He was a partner with management firm McKinsey. He's also specialised in agricultural investments, and it's that part of his CV which is now raising questions. At the centre of this are water buybacks.
Water buyback is where the government offers to purchase from willing sellers the water entitlements that irrigators use for farming purposes.
Is water worth a lot of money?
Oh yeah, it is, and it's worth a lot more during a drought.
Water levels in the Murray-Darling Basin, our country's main water source, aren't enough to sustain irrigation, the environment and our growing usage. So the government created a scheme to cap how much is taken out and allow for it to be traded. The government buys back water from farms. Sometimes there are also negotiated buybacks, which are not open to tender. And the money involved can be huge.
How much transparency is there around these negotiated buybacks?
Very little indeed. So questions have been asked in the Senate about the nature of these buybacks, who got the buybacks, why did they get them, how much was paid, what was the value for money, all those sorts of legitimate questions that any taxpayer would want to ask.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. From 2008 to 2009, Angus Taylor was both director and secretary for a company called Eastern Australia Agriculture. An ASIC search reveals he stepped down in 2009. The company owned two properties in Queensland, Kia and Clyde. And through that, in 2017, sold water licences back to the government at an unusually high price of nearly $80 million. The highest price ever paid. EAA booked $52 million profit on that sale. From 2007 until this year, EAA had been wholly owned by another company called Eastern Australia Irrigation, which is registered in the Cayman Islands. The parent company in the Caymans had also made loans to the Australian company and was charging a large amount of interest on those loans. Last year, that interest appears to have been more than $14 million, or an extraordinarily large rate of around 20%. What makes all of this particularly curious is that on his official government website, Angus Taylor lists the company in the Cayman Islands as a company that he was co-founder and director of. We approached Angus Taylor about this yesterday.
Are you still part of that corporation?
No.
And why was it set up in the Cayman Islands?
Look, I have responded to this issue. There's no basis in fact on some of the claims that have been made, and I've no further comments to make on it.
Do your family have any links to this?
I've said everything that needs to be said on this. I have no involvement with that company, and nor does my family.
I've been working with financial journalist Michael West to go through the documentation.
Why does it matter if the Federal Energy Minister has some involvement with a company in the Cayman Islands?
Well, because this is a public asset. These are water licences. A record price for water licences, a $52 million profit from water licences booked in this Australian company, 14 million of which has been sent to the Cayman Islands, to this mysterious entity which Angus Taylor founded, or appears to have founded, but which we know nothing more about. Nothing illegal about that, but you've got to ask, is it appropriate during an election campaign for a minister to be running around threatening to sue journalists who are asking for an explanation?
Kia and Clyde are two of Queensland's biggest cotton producers. Between them, they can hold a significant amount of overflow floodwater on their land.
Overflow water happens when there is a flood. If you capture that water, then you can use that water, put it into storage, and then use it to grow a crop or two.
Is your ownership of overflow water different to the licence you might have for water elsewhere in the Murray-Darling
Absolutely,
Basin?
it's very different, because you can only exercise your right in terms of flood water when there's a flood. So there haven't been many floods recently.
So how and why did Eastern Australia Agriculture end up with this huge windfall?
In buying this water from Eastern Australia Agriculture, did the federal government pay a record price?
Yes, yeah.
How much did they pay in total?
A bit over $80 million in total.
How much should they have paid?
Well, nothing, because you can't use the water.
We paid $80 million of taxpayers' money, and we should have paid nothing.
Well, you can't use the water outside the property.
Was there one person, one minister that oversaw this decision?
This was all done and signed off by Barnaby Joyce. This is not a unique example of a huge amount of money being paid for water that was done without due process, that didn't go through a tender process, and that will not return one drop of water back to the environment.
Documents show EAA had previously made unsuccessful attempts to sell water to the government until 2017, when there was a sudden change of heart. Barnaby Joyce was in charge, overseeing the sale at a landmark price.
This company doesn't appear to be making much money from the production of cotton, but it's making huge money from the sale of water. Is that what the business model is?
Well, it's certainly that the company was valued at $107 million around about the time of this deal, and they sold some of their water to the Commonwealth for $80 million. They've kept the property, they've kept the rest of their water, which is river water, which is much more reliable. So they've certainly, made the best part of their money back just on this water sale.
Pretty good deal for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Water, as we all know, is a scarce commodity in drought-ravaged Australia. The fish kills in Menindee over the past year have led to furious debate about how and why our water isn't being better managed. Some politicians say there simply isn't enough water to go around. So how is it then that some powerful people are actually making hundreds of millions of dollars from it?
Doesn't sound like the system is working as it should.
It doesn't sound like it's working at all. This isn't something which should be subject to profits and tax havens. The reason you're in the Cayman Islands is presumably for secrecy, because it's a secrecy jurisdiction.
Who has questions to answer here?
The first question that has to be asked is to the Minister. When these purchases took place, that was in 2017, the Minister was Barnaby Joyce. He was both the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Water, and indeed the Deputy Prime Minister. So to what extent he is connected in any way to those decisions? Why, against advice, at least in one of those purchases, against departmental advice, the purchase went ahead anyway? We pay taxes, we work hard, and we don't want our money wasted going to multimillionaires who just happen to be connected to people. It wasn't the Minister's money. It wasn't Barnaby Joyce's piggy bank. It's your money, it's my money, it's taxpayers' money.
Well, Hamish McDonald joins us now. Hey, Barnaby Joyce has previously been dead against water buybacks. Why the about-face now?
I simply don't know, Georgie. We put a series of written questions to Barnaby Joyce today about this story, including this key question. You spend $80 million of taxpayers' money on this water buyback. What did we, the taxpayer, get in return? Late this afternoon, I got a one-line written statement from one of his advisors saying Barnaby is out of range, campaigning. Sorry.
Hamish, just want to follow up on that, because that company that's in the Caymans, of course, there's the question of the connection to Angus Taylor. The heart of this issue then becomes, has he benefited financially from this in any way? Do we know that? Is it possible for us to know that?
Well, he couldn't be clearer. He says absolutely not. So not only did we put those questions to him yesterday on camera, we also submitted written questions to him today, and we've received written responses. I'm just going to read them because we need to be absolutely clear about this. Angus Taylor's advisor says that the minister never had any direct or indirect financial interest in EAA, that's the Australian company, or any associated companies. We have to assume that means the Caymans-based company. He also says that Minister Taylor received no benefit from this transaction. But there's timeline questions here. If Angus Taylor was associated with that Caymans-based company, when did that stop? We've got access to various ASIC documents, but the picture is not fully realised. And I think we do have to keep asking questions here about what happened in 2017 that made the Australian government change its mind and buy this water for a record price.
Thanks so much, Hamish.